This offseason in the NBA is going to be out of control. So many different moves, so many different interesting free agents. And today we got to talk about some of these recent trade rumors that are coming up and where each of these players could end up. Really quickly though, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, PrizePicks. As the postseason wraps up in the NBA, PrizePicks wants to make sure they're giving you guys the best promotions they have, and so they have two big ones going on right now. If you use code SPORTING, click the link in the description, you get a 100% deposit match up to $100 on PrizePicks, and you have an opportunity when you play to opt into that millionaire promotion that we've talked about in the past as well. And the way that works is every single day of the postseason, PrizePicks is going to pick one entry, and they're going to adjust the payouts of that entry based off of what you see on screen here, depending on if you got 4, 5, or 6 picks correct. And if you get all 6 of your picks correct and you're the entry that PrizePicks selects, you're a millionaire. And the great thing about both of these promotions is they're super easy. For the 100% deposit match, you click the link in the description, you use code SPORTING, boom, it's there. For the millionaire promotion, all you got to do is opt in as you play PrizePicks like normally. And of course, all you got to do on PrizePicks is you go through and it's you against the numbers. You go on the site, you pick more or less for between 2 and 6 selections, depending on what you think is going to happen in a given game. It doesn't have to be basketball. That's what the biggest deal is right now going on, but you could do baseball, you could do a variety of different things all on the same night on different nights. And if you get these picks correct, more or less on these numbers you see behind me, you win some cash, and you could win that millionaire promotion as well. So if you want to get started on PrizePicks today, you can use that 100% deposit match up to $100 when you use code SPORTING to get started with PrizePicks today. PrizePicks is available in over 30 states. You must be 19 and older to play, and age restrictions vary by state. And please play responsibly. Hope you guys have a great time with PrizePicks, and thank you again to PrizePicks for sponsoring this video. First and foremost, to me, one of the most interesting situations of the entire offseason is Jaylen Brown in Boston for 2 different reasons. One, I think he has a significant amount of value. I think he's a player that Boston can get a lot back for. Whether they want to push this down the road a little bit, maybe be a lot better in a couple of years rather than trying to come up with an immediate fix. And then the other thing that makes that situation interesting is I'm not convinced that even if he signs the Supermax contract, that Jaylen Brown really wants to be a Boston Celtic. And as a result, there have been a lot of trade rumors flying around, both from reported sources as well as not, and I got to get into those. And there's a couple of different Portland scenarios here that have been thrown around the internet. One, of course, is just Jaylen Brown straight up in exchange for Damian Lillard. Portland does like the semi-rebuild here where they get a player that's much younger in Jaylen Brown that they can build around, that can be a focal point of their franchise while keeping the 3rd pick in the draft, while keeping Shaedon Sharpe. Obviously, that's interesting for them. For Boston, I think having a guard in place of Jaylen Brown could do wonders for their team. Yes, they might struggle defensively because Dame has no interest in being a defender whatsoever, but him and Tatum together in combination with the rest of the depth on that Celtics roster, I think could be a really, really fun group. And I just want to kind of see what it looks like when someone like Tatum is playing alongside an awesome guard like Damian Lillard. I don't think that's necessarily likely, but I think from a structure standpoint, it's interesting. It's just whether or not Portland actually wants to pull the trigger on that. And if they don't, and they'd rather continue to build around Lillard, which I think is much more likely, the other scenario would be something similar to Jaylen Brown going to Portland in exchange for Anthony Simons and the 3rd pick. In my opinion, Jaylen Brown is worth more than that. There'd have to be more stuff in there. The history of star or superstar trades, whatever category you want to put Jaylen Brown into. Yes, he struggled this most recent postseason, but he was the best player for Boston in the finals last year. So there's clearly a lot of value there. And I think he's worth more than just Simons and the 3rd overall pick. And if there is a situation where Portland ends up with Jaylen Brown, I think it's going to be more similar to this trade rather than, straight up for Dame. Then things get weird and things get interesting. I've also seen this one floating around. I think someone sent this to me on Twitter actually. And this would be Brown going to Portland, Simons and the 3rd pick going to Charlotte, and the Hornets sending LaMelo Ball to Boston. Again, I think a guard in exchange for Jaylen Brown, a true guard. Like, yes, maybe he's a 2 sometimes, but for the most part, he's a wing. But a lead guard, a guy that facilitates, a guy that creates, a guy that can get Tatum the ball in the spots where he wants to have it. That, I think, is the best way to restructure the talent on the Celtics roster if they want to go away from having Jaylen Brown there. And LaMelo is an interesting fit. In the concept of Charlotte trading away LaMelo to get the 2nd and 3rd picks in this class, there have been a lot of rumors about whether they're going to take Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller with the 2nd pick. Would they pair Scoot Henderson alongside LaMelo Ball? In this particular situation, they make that choice by saying we're going to have Scoot and we're going to have, I would assume, Brandon Miller here with the 3rd pick and move forward with those 2 guys as the foundation of the franchise, moving on from someone in LaMelo that's incredibly talented, but they haven't had a ton of success with with him on the floor. Obviously, injuries and all kinds of different lack of talent issues have been a big part of that, but maybe they're willing to move on from him, reset the rookie contract scale here, and not have to worry about the big extension for LaMelo. They've got Scoot, they've got Brandon Miller. I think that's a really interesting structure. I think LaMelo in Boston, it would be an unbelievable thing to see. It's probably not ultimately all that realistic though. And the question that comes up here for Boston is, why would they do this now? Jaylen Brown has been in trade rumors for years, going back to Anthony Davis, going back to Kawhi Leonard. He's always been a guy that they've looked at trading, or at least has been involved in trade rumors, and they've never done it. Why would they do it now? Well, I think this season was the clearest case of Boston has reached their ceiling with this group. Whatever Brown and Tatum were going to be able to accomplish, which ultimately was a lot in terms of conference finals appearances, making the finals last year, it's kind of run its course. I think Jaylen wants to be somewhere where he's the main guy. He certainly wants the big contract. I think Boston's willing to give that to him, but it feels like this is a situation that needs correcting, that they need to move on from. And this particular season, this postseason especially, I think proved that to the Celtics organization, even if the rest of the league has maybe thought that should have been the case for a year or two now. But the entire video is not just about Jaylen Brown. Another player to me that's super interesting, that's been coming up in a lot of rumors, is DeAndre Ayton, and specifically what Phoenix is going to do with the rest of this roster, coming off of one of the biggest trades in league history, bringing in Kevin Durant midseason. It's clear that they're going to keep KD, they're going to keep Devin Booker, and pretty much everything else is on the table. And I have a trade structure here that actually gets rid of not only DeAndre Ayton, but also sends Chris Paul elsewhere as well. In this deal, Phoenix would get Kyrie Irving, Doug McDermott, Zach Collins, and Devontae Graham. The Mavs would get DeAndre Ayton, and the Spurs would get Chris Paul. Now, my mindset here was I started with, let's get DeAndre Ayton to Dallas and let's get Kyrie to the Suns. Kyrie has that connection with Kevin Durant. I think ultimately he's probably going to end up on a different team, whether that be the Lakers, whether that be the Suns. Dallas is motivated to retain Kyrie, but ultimately he is a free agent and he can threaten to leave for nothing, in which case I think could force the hand of Dallas to sign and trade him elsewhere. And I'm not sure that Dallas, even though it's something that they obviously wanted to do at the deadline, I don't know if they're super excited about a long-term commitment to Kyrie Irving, especially if he constantly has eyes for other places. And in this situation, Phoenix gets Kyrie and KD back together. Regardless of what you think about Kyrie, him, Devin Booker, and KD together is an unbelievable scoring trio. It's similar to what we saw in Brooklyn when they had KD, Kyrie, of course, and then Harden in replacement of Devin Booker. Booker, I think at this stage of his career, is better than Harden was. And also, getting rid of Chris Paul, because obviously if you have Kyrie, there's no point in having Chris Paul on the team, allows them to fill out this roster with role players that they desperately need. They get some shooting, they get a little bit of size, they get some guys that they can play on the wing. All of that to me makes sense for Phoenix's perspective. Now, obviously the Paul situation is a little bit weird right now because there's been reports that he's waived, where there are other reports that they're still trying to trade him. So you don't know exactly what's happening with Paul and whether or not he would actually go to San Antonio. So the value here is actually probably lower. That San Antonio might not have to really give up anything in exchange for Paul, but I still think that's an interesting destination, even if he does get waived. Dallas gets DeAndre Ayton. Again, it's about preserving the asset. If at the deadline they could have sent Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, and a first to Phoenix for DeAndre Ayton, I think they would have really considered that. And at this point, if you would rather be out of the Kyrie business or he just doesn't want to be there anymore, I think you could certainly do much worse than getting DeAndre Ayton in exchange and giving someone alongside Luka Doncic, a pick and roll partner, someone that can continue to grow alongside him as still a younger player. The question mark, I'm sure, for a lot of people looking at this trade is, why is San Antonio involved here? Well, we've gotten a lot of rumors about this concept that San Antonio wants to upgrade to the point guard position, especially now with Wembanyama coming in. They want a stable presence at that spot. Assuming he's healthy, it doesn't get much more stable than Chris Paul. And this would be a very Spurs-like move where, yes, they're giving up, some pieces. Someone like Zach Collins, they probably don't want to give up, and maybe are giving up a little bit too much value here. That's arguable. That's fine if you want to have that conversation. But the idea of bringing in Chris Paul in San Antonio, I think makes at least a little bit of sense. You have him alongside Wembanyama. It's not that you're trying to win a ton of games, but you're trying to provide a stable environment in a situation there in San Antonio where intentionally they've gone really, really young. And you want to make sure that when you have a player as generational as Wembanyama, that you set him up for success. And that's the idea behind getting Chris Paul. Ultimately, I think this solves a lot of issues for Phoenix, and then the other teams are kind of thrown in here as a result. But there is a structure here, and I think ultimately Ayton himself is going to get moved, and I think there's a structure here that makes sense for Phoenix to get rid of both him and Chris Paul at the same time. Speaking of the Kyrie stuff, this is something that could go a bunch of different directions. I touched on it a little bit here in that previous section. The Lakers are going to be a threat. I think Phoenix is going to be a threat. And I think Kyrie himself is going to be a threat to Dallas. He's going to push the buttons here a little bit of, oh, I could go to this team in free agency. Maybe I'm the guy in San Antonio alongside Wembanyama. It's incredibly unlikely, but he's going to try and push those buttons because, as I've mentioned before, the one thing that Kyrie wants more than anything else is he wants the long-term commitment on a 4-year max. It's what he wanted from Brooklyn. They wouldn't give it to him. It's why he left Brooklyn in the first place, among amongst a lot of other dysfunction there with that franchise. And if he doesn't get that kind of commitment from Dallas, he's going to either work some of these other teams to try and get that commitment from Dallas, or he's going to actively search out situations like the Lakers, like Phoenix, that are desperate enough to add someone of the talent level of Kyrie that they would be willing to commit to a 4-year max for Kyrie. And as soon as he gets that commitment, if he gets that commitment from Phoenix or the Lakers and says, yes, Kyrie, we will give you your 4-year max, he's going to start pushing his way to those other situations if Dallas isn't willing to do that. And even if Dallas is willing to, I think that Kyrie would much rather play alongside his buddy Kevin Durant in Phoenix or go and try and win a title in LA with LeBron. I think he sees it in terms of trying to win a title. The upside is not there with Dallas, and if he can secure that long-term financial commitment, that is priority number 1 for Kyrie. And I think those are very clearly the 3 destinations: Dallas on a max, the Lakers on a max, or Phoenix on a max. Sign and trade to those last 2 teams. And of course, with Kyrie, you never know, there could be a random mystery 4th or 5th team out there for him as well. That'll wrap up the trade rumors for today, and I can't wait for some more.